and I will just get the record on. Lovely, we're on record. So Christian, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. Absolute pleasure. And Christian, working for Examiliason, and in charge of these beautiful properties that we're going to look at tonight, and talking to us all the way from Bordeaux. Thank you for joining us, and we look very much forward to tasting the wines with you tonight. So I'll hand over to you, and I understand you have some presentations to walk us through, and then through the wines.
Exactly. So I'm going to start by just showing a few little pictures of the vineyards to give you an idea. The main theme tonight is the wines from Chateau Pichon Baron in Pauillac, and that's where I actually am at the moment. But we are also going to show, we're going to kick off with a dry white wine from Chateau Pichon in Sauternes, and we're going to finish off with a 10-year-old Tawny from Quinta de Noval in Portugal. Just to give you a very quick introduction to Axamilizim and to me, I guess. My name's Christian Seeley. I'm an Englishman, as you might have gathered, but very much based in France and Portugal. I started working with this wonderful company, Axamilizim, 27 years ago now, when they invited me to go to Quinta de Noval as managing director. They just bought it, and Quinta de Noval at the time was a jewel that was in need of polishing and a property that needed love and attention. And I've been giving it that for the last 27 years. But about 20 years ago, they asked me to come to Bordeaux and take over as managing director of the whole Axamilizim group. So I do that now. So in this company, we have Pichon Baron, of course, in Pauillac. We have Chateau Pichon, also in Pauillac. We have Chateau Pichon in Sauternes, Domaine Arlot in Burgundy, Dijnocke in Hungary, in Tokaj, Quinta de Noval in Portugal, and Outpost Wines in Napa Valley now, which is an acquisition we made about 3 years ago. But anyway, the focus now is on the properties that we're going to taste this evening. And I'm going to go on to the presentation, if that works. I think now, can you see what I can see? I hope you can.
Yes, we can.
What you have on your screen is good. What you should have on your screen is a little set of pictures of all the properties of Axamilizim with Pichon Baron at the top, sort of fairy tale castle in the middle of Bordeaux in Pauillac. And then you see to the right of that Chateau Pichon, also another utterly magnificent Premier Cru Sauternes property. Of course, best known for making the great vin liquoreux, but we're going to kick off with the dry white wine from Pichon, and I'll talk more about that when we've got the wine. And then down below, you see Quinta de Noval, also dazzlingly beautiful property in the heart of the Douro Valley, 145 hectares of vineyard. And now I have to see how to move this thing. Hold on. Right. So that shows where we are. You've got Bordeaux, which is the situation of Pichon Baron Pichon. You can see Domaine Arlot in Burgundy, Quinta de Noval in Portugal, and then right over the other side of, sort of in between us and you, you've got our outpost in Napa, which is literally an outpost. Focusing in on Bordeaux, you can see the city of Bordeaux, you can see the estuary of the Gironde going out to the sea, and of course Pichon Baron is a left bank property on the left bank of the Gironde. And going down below Bordeaux, you can see where Chateau Pichon is in Sauternes, and that's the first property we're going to take a quick look at and taste some of its wines. So Chateau Pichon, it's rather a dreamy property. It's unlike most of the Medoc chateaux, which tend to have been built in the last 150 years or 200 years. The Sauternes properties tend to be much older, and this is nearly 4 centuries old, actually. And as you can see, it's an utterly lovely place. So, of course, what we mostly do, the majority of our production in Sauternes is making vin liquoreux, and I've got a few shots here just showing vineyard and giving you an idea about the Botrytis cinerea. Not strictly relevant to the wine we're going to drink, but it's always wonderful to see this. You can see in these photos how the grapes start off healthy, and then as the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness arrives in September and October, you get the misty mornings, which are perfect conditions for the Botrytis cinerea, this magical mushroom. And don't giggle, anyone who's been to university. It's a fungus, of course, which attacks the skins of the grapes, shrivels them up, as you see in the bottom right-hand corner, and turns into this wonderful vin liquoreux, which we call Sauterne. But we have that's Pierre Montaigu, who is the technical director of Chateau Sudereau. So if I just stay on the pictures of Chateau Sudereau, I think we could actually have a little taste of the Blanc Sec, because it's, I think, the right time for an aperitif for you. And it's time for my breakfast white wine here in France. And this wine is the Blanc Sec of Chateau Sudereau. And we started making dry white wines at Chateau Sudereau actually quite some time ago now, in 2004. And we make two white wines. One is called the S, Vieille Vigne, which we started in 2004. And that's a very tiny production from very old vines. And we don't make very much of that, but what we're aiming at with the S is to really to show the absolute top quality dry white wine that can be made from a Premier Cru Sauterne property. And the Blanc Sec we use, we make considerably more of. We use the entire vineyard. Basically, we go through the vineyard the end of August, beginning of September, before botrytis has even begun to appear, and we pick healthy grapes to make a dry white wine. The aim with the Blanc Sec de Sudereau is to make a high quality dry white wine with a unique personality. Unique because it comes from a Sauterne Premier Cru vineyard, and that's unique in itself. And Chateau Sudereau is a very special individual terroir in Sauterne, but also pretty unusual because the terroir of Chateau Sudereau in particular, and Sauterne in general, is one of the world's great terroirs for the Semillon grape. As you know very well, there are wonderful terroirs for Sauvignon Blanc all over the world, and you've got one of them, or several of them actually. But Semillon, it's a little rarer to find the perfect terroir for the Semillon grape. And so right from the beginning, we've always focused on the Semillon that we have planted at Chateau Sudereau to make this dry white wine. And this one is it's slight majority Semillon, 54% Semillon, and the rest Sauvignon Blanc. And so I'm just going to have a little taste, and I suggest you do the same. You'll forgive me if I spit. I only start swallowing at about 11 o'clock in the morning. One has to be rational for a few hours of the day. So this is I think, very expressive of something special about the Sudereau property. Of course, the classic expression of Sudereau is the grand vin liquoreux, which couldn't be more different to this. But you do have something of the aromas that you can sometimes find in a mature glass of Sauterne from Chateau Sudereau. And I think there's a lovely balance and harmony in this wine. You've got some really lovely structure from the Semillon, and a sort of bright freshness in the Sauvignon Blanc. And we've considerably increased the production of this wine in recent years. We're not giving up the day job. We're still making great vin liquoreux, but we really began to realize the quality potential of dry white wine from a Premier Cru Sauterne property a few years back, and we're really, as I'm sure you know, great Sauterne, however delicious it is not something that people drink, alas, every day these days. And although there will always be a market for a small amount of very, very good, rich, sweet Sauterne, and what we've been developing the dry white wine, quality dry white wines at Soudero, not to replace the Sauterne, but to enable us to carry on making Sauterne, really. And it's working very well. It's actually giving the property a new lease of life commercially, and will enable, I think, these high quality dry white wines from Sauterne. There are one or two others from some of my neighbors, but it's, you can just concentrate on the Soudero one. I think they're breathing new life into Sauterne, and will help the vital task of being able to help Sauterne survive, because conditions are quite difficult in Sauterne, or have been in recent years. But the high quality dry white wines are helping us keep the show on the road.
Christian, we've had some comments there already on how fantastic it is. And I think I remember when I first tasted this, when I was visiting at Pichon Baron, and super excited about it, and also excited to bring it back here to New Zealand, because I think this is exactly the kind of wine that challenges sort of what we perceive of Semillon Sauvignon or Sauvignon Semillon blends in New Zealand. And you'd be delighted to know how many New Zealand winemakers we sell this to.
I'm delighted to hear that, of course.
We have just a question there in terms of the barrel aging of this.
Yes. So it's 55% in barrels and 45% in stainless steel vats. And of the barrels, let me just check. It's actually it says 5% new barrels. That's just one new barrel, and the rest is barrels of 1 and 2 years. And it's aged for 6 months, and then it's bottled. And so this is the 18. But actually the 20 is just about to be bottled, and so you can, it ages incredibly well, and this some people like to have the latest one in the market straight away, but I absolutely adore this 2018. I think it's partly because of the Semillon component, which particularly ages well. When it's got a couple of years on it like this, I think it's worth waiting for, actually, although there's nothing wrong with buying it as soon as it's in bottle and popping a cork, but it can age, I think.
Very good. Did anyone have any more comments or questions on that wine? You've made everyone speechless in New Zealand, Christian.
But that won't last, I'm sure. Let's see how speechless our people are after we've had all these nice red wines from Pichon Baron.
I think one thing I really like about that wine, Christian, is it's changed quite a lot over the last year since we first received it. When we first got it, there was some quite prominent acidity there, and it was a little bit more down that like driving kind of side, and now it's starting to soften and it's starting to really richen on the palate. And I think people who are trying it tonight, perhaps who tried it when it first arrived, might be a little bit surprised if they didn't like it before. They found it, a little bit on the nervous side. Now it's really starting to come into its own, and you can see why you keep this wine for a few years in the cellar. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's a question of the terroir as well. If you think about Chateau Soudero and its the vineyard, it's been known for a couple of centuries or more for making wines that can age for 100 years. I have actually tasted the 1900 Chateau Soudero Sauterne. It's rather delicious, actually, and still going strong. And so we have a terroir that can make very long-lived wines. Of course, in liqueur form, they're more likely to age for a very long time. But we know the terroir is there and the potential for aging. And you know, these wines are lovely to drink when they're babies, but they are worth, and it's worth hanging on to them for a few years just to see how they develop. That's true of this one. It's even more true of the S if you get hold of any of that. But that unfortunately we only make about 500 cases a year of that one. But that's really worth digging out a bottle or two if you can find it, because that can age. I'm convinced will age for decades. So that's, and this is Pierre Montaigu, who is the very brilliant winemaker at Chateau Sidereau, who makes the vin liqueur and the dry white wines. Okay, so now we come to Chateau Pichon Baron, and as you can see from the information you received, we're going to taste a little range of a little vertical, quite a big vertical actually, of Les Tourelles de Longueville, which is the second wine of Chateau Pichon Baron, and then we're going to have a couple of vintages of the Grand Vin. So I'd like to show you a few little images about Pichon Baron, first of all. So on the top left-hand corner, you can see the boundary stone of Chateau Pichon Baron. I'm very attached to this boundary stone because I had it built or made and carved. It's one piece of stone, and it's on the edge of Pichon Baron, and it's exactly opposite the two boundary stones of Chateau Latour and Chateau Longueville-Lascas, who are my two neighbors on the other side of the road. And I'll show you more of the juxtaposition of those boundary stones later on. To the right, you get a view of the great plateau at the heart of Pichon Baron. And as you can see, it's not flat. People think that the Medoc is flat, but it's not. And you have in the great terroirs of the Medoc, you have these undulating mounds of basically deep beds of gravel. And this, as you know, you've got a bit of deep beds of gravel in New Zealand, but as you know, is the perfect terroir for the Cabernet Sauvignon grape. And Pichon Baron Grand Vin, which we'll come to later on in the tasting, is defined by noble old vine Cabernet Sauvignon growing in these deep beds of gravel. But Pichon Baron is not just about the plateau at the heart of the property. Here's a nice view of that's what we see from the chateau. That's what I can see if I look out the window right now. There's the chateau itself. I'm in the left-hand front drawing room at the moment, just so you know. Okay, so here you can. I love this view because if you look at the lion, that's the boundary stone of Longueville-Lascas, and then just to his right, there's a lower boundary stone. That's the boundary stone of Chateau Latour, and then in the background you can see the Chateau of Pichon Baron. Then you got our boundary stone, which we carved. When I say we carved, I had a very wonderful French stonemason carved it. It took a very long time because it's just carved out of one solid piece of stone. And then you see the three boundary stones all together. Latour on the left, Pichon Baron, Longueville-Lascas. And it's a very important little position because I believe that this little corner where you have Chateau Latour, Pichon Baron, and Longueville-Lascas, you have this wonderful undulating ground of deep beds of gravel for all three properties. And I think it has a serious claim to be considered at least among, if not the greatest terroir in the world for the Cabernet Sauvignon grape. And obviously it's no coincidence that all three of these properties make wines that are a huge majority Cabernet Sauvignon. So this little map is quite important. Can you see a cursor if I put it on the screen or not? You can. Oh, good.
Yes, we can.
So this is Chateau Pichon Baron. The chateau is here. So I'm right here. You saw pictures of it there. And all this, everything that's outlined in orangey pink is the vineyard of Pichon Baron. The big plateau I was talking about is this wonderful area here, just next to the chateau, where you have that sort of that undulating ground. Just on this side of the road, you've got the vineyard of Chateau Latour, where they make a nice drop of red too. And then just over here, you've got this is the frontier with Saint-Julien, and over here you've got the Clos of Les Villes-Lascaux, and so that's what, and the boundary stones are just here in the corner. And so when I took over running Pichon Baron Axe Millésime on the 1st of January 2001, and we made a strategic decision in 2001, which was quite important, because before then we were using all of this land to make Pichon Baron, and we made very much more Pichon Baron before 2001 than we do today. To give you an idea, in the 1990s, we were making up to 350,000 bottles a year of Grand Vin Pichon Baron, and not that much second wine, Les Tourelles. From 2001 onwards, we took the decision to concentrate on the very greatest terroir, this bit here, and this extraordinary gravel terroir for Cabernet Sauvignon. And since 2001, we've sourced the Grand Vin of Pichon Baron only from the very greatest terroirs of Pishon, centered on this wonderful plateau. The consequence of that, there's been a few consequences. One is we make much less Pichon Baron now. We average 150,000 bottles of Pichon Baron Grand Vin over the last 20 years, whereas before it was about 350. That's a very, very big difference to decide to voluntarily to reduce your production. But the aim was obviously a quality one. There is literally, I believe, no limit to the quality potential of the greatest terroirs of Pichon Baron. And so we took the decision to concentrate on those Grand Terroirs for the Grand Vin, with the aim of making Pichon Baron as great as it possibly could be. So one consequence is there's less Pichon in the last 20 years. Another one, I hope, is that the wine has become, as great as it, or is on the way to becoming as great as it can be. Another consequence, which is very interesting, is that we make a lot of extremely good second wine, because all these other pieces of land here that we don't use in the Grand Vin anymore, they were making Pichon Baron before, and today they make Les Tourelles, and we have another one called Les Griffons. But Les Tourelles is it's our Merlot-based second wine, and this parcel over here is more Merlot than Cabernet. It's always the base of Les Tourelles, and then the Les Tourelles comes from all these vineyards here, which are very serious, high-quality Pauillac terroir, which used to make Pichon Baron, but which now make the second wine. And so the other consequence of this extreme ultra qualitative decision we took in 2001 is that we have a reasonable quantity of extremely good second wine, and I suggest that we start to taste those wines now. I suggest we start with the 2017 Les Tourelles. Yeah, I think we can leave that now. So 2017 was we've had a run of really lovely years here in Bordeaux. 2017 was it's sandwiched in between 16 and 18, two of the greatest years Bordeaux has had, I think. And so 2017 doesn't tend to get as much recognition for the high quality year that it is. It was a very sunny year. It was just that the summer was fairly cool, and so when you compare, you'll see when you get to the Les Tourelles 16 afterwards, the 17 has a lovely freshness about it, but the grapes got perfectly ripe. It was a prolonged sunny summer, just rather cool. So when you get to the 16, you'll see that it's richer, a bit more velvety and all that. But the 17s, I think, and you'll see particularly when you compare Pichon 17 and Pichon 16, the 17s have enormous charm in the classic style of great Bordeaux, providing freshness and balance and wonderfully drinkable wines. And I think this 17 Tourelle is a good example of that. So I think you've got all the statistics in front of you, but you'll see that this, like all Tourelle, is majority Merlot. In the case of 17, 55% Merlot, and then we've got 27% Cabernet Sauvignon, 13% Franc, and 5% Petit Verdot. Petit Verdot is a very interesting element in the blend of Tourelle because it adds, even just 5%, adds some serious structure to the wine. And we always have a little bit of Petit Verdot in the Tourelle. So Tourelle is actually the only wine from Pichon Baron that has all 4 grape varieties: Cabernet, the 2 Cabernets, Merlot, and Petit Verdot.
I think, Christian, when we have a 2017s arrive, and I think tasting this tonight, you know, it might be sandwiched between 2 great vintages, but they're delicious wines. You know, that's just absolutely gorgeous tonight. And they have sort of a really nice velvety texture to them. You know, they make you want to go back and have another sip.
Yes. Actually, I find that
early in the morning for you, it's not very fair.
So I think it would be a good idea to pour a 16 and have a little taste of the 16, and then go back to the 17, and because the comparison is very relevant. It's one of the fascinations of a vertical tasting, I think, is really seeing how much you have a personality of a property, obviously, but how much the weather conditions here in the Medoc, which of course we have Atlantic climate, every year is completely different one way or another, and where there's always a thread running through a vertical, which is the personality of the place. You do have significant climate variations and consequently different characters to each wine, which is part of the fun of wines from this part of the world.
Christian, in the modern era where you've started making a lot more Tourelles and less Grand Vin, has there been any vintages where, because of the quality of the Merlot has been particularly high, that you've actually increased the percentage of Cabernet significantly in the Tourelles because less of it has gone into the Grand Vin?
No, it's we don't pinch the Merlots from Tourelle. In fact, the percentages they're remaining pretty constant now. You'll see if you look at these percentages, they vary slightly from year to year. It's the same in the Grand Vin. Pichon Baron these days is around 80% Cabernet and 20% Merlot, and it doesn't vary very much. There's obviously a little bit of variation from year to year in terms of the relative yield of each varietal, which can change percentages, and one lot from one parcel might migrate from one wine to the other, but generally speaking, it remains pretty constant.
Okay, we've also had a question about the alcohol on the 2017 and perhaps how that relates to the other vintages. Has that also been reasonably consistent, or are we seeing large variations there as well?
So the 17, we don't actually see that much variation on alcohols here. We're at 13.5 on both these wines, and there's quite a degree of consistency, not only on the labels but also in the wine. Yeah, every Tourelle we're going to taste today is 13.5, and that's you know, the ripeness at which we tend to pick. We're not aiming, of course, for higher alcohol than that. It occasionally happens that the alcohol levels can go up a little bit, as they did, in fact, in which we're not tasting today, in 2018. For the first time in 2018, we normally we're historically we're around 13.5 for Torel every year, but in 2018, for the first time, we went over 14. We went to 14.3, I think. And that was just the result of an extremely long, hot summer. So 2016, if you compare to the 17, it was quite a different year. It was a magnificent year with a very prolonged ripening period. We get years that are characterized by all sorts of different things here. Sometimes you have a year that's characterized by a really good ripening period in the summer. Sometimes you have years that have quite cool summers, but very good ripening periods at the end. And then you have wines like 16 or years like 16, where you just have a prolonged, magnificent ripening period. This was it started off a bit cool and wet in the winter and the spring, but after that, a summer set in 16. It was just prolonged, sunny weather, not too hot, and then a magnificent end of season in September and October, still not too hot. So we were actually able to really wait and harvest exactly when we wanted. And so in 16, we actually harvested, we went on till the 19th of October because we had marvelous weather and we could just wait. So you've got some very rich ripeness, I think also a velvety quality, but a different sort of personality clearly in the 16. And it's just a lovely year. But then you know, if you focus on the 16 and then you go back to the 17, the 17 stands up very well with its slightly more delicate freshness about it. And I think that it's really fun to compare these two wines. So we can move on and taste the 15. 15 was a very, hold on, I've got some corky dust there. 15 was a very different year to 16. If 16 was, as I said, the year where we had a prolonged ripening season, marvelous summer, marvelous end of season, 15 was a year where it's an absolutely typical example of a year where the wine gets ripe in the summer. It wasn't a great ripening period at the end of season, but we had a magnificent sunny and actually very hot summer in 2015, and you get that in the 2015 wines. You've got a very generous sort of ripe mid palate. Slightly drier tannins than the 16 at this stage, and that's absolutely characteristic of one of these wines that ripens in the summer. This was early harvest because it was completely ripe, and the 15 is characterized by quite spiky hot weather in August particularly, but also in July, that gives the wines this character. If you compare with 16, which was perfectly ripened over a long period, the 16 I think has a little more freshness than the 15, but the 15 has a lovely exuberant generosity in the mid palate, and is a very attractive year as well.
Christian, do you want to maybe just pop the presentation down for 1 second so we can see you full screen?
Yeah, 11 to 10. Let me have a go at that.
Sorry, the technical side of it. I know it's early in the morning.
There we are.
Absolutely perfect. That's lovely. And while I've got you there, I think what we've seen so far is, and you know, I love this when it comes up with Bordeaux, because I think we read what's written and we're very quick to dismiss things like the 2017.
Yeah.
But this is just showing that, you know, that 2015, it's just such a big wine now, but the 17 is what you should be drinking now.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, it's brilliant. I can't wait to go to the next one. They're very clear of what their vintages are.
Okay, well, look, I think we can taste the 14 as well. And I think it's actually quite an important thing when we're doing a tasting like this to taste each wine, but then to just go up and down and have a you know, little comparison in both directions, because that way you get a clearer idea of what's in front of us. 14 was almost in terms of style and personality, I'd say 14 is almost the diametric opposite of 2015. So 15, hot, sunny summer, not much of a ripening period at the end, but it didn't need it. Early harvest, in it came. The 2014, exactly the other way around. We had a very cool summer, and we still get those here, because you know, we're next to the Atlantic Ocean, and it is the one thing you can be sure of, is that weather in Medoc is unpredictable. But it was actually quite sunny in 14, but much cooler than a normal summer. But then followed by an extraordinary month of September, very sunny, very warm, and that went right on into October, actually. So we were able to wait. And whereas it's the mirror image of 15 in many ways. So 15 was early harvest, because no need for extra ripening, and anyway the conditions weren't there. This one is late harvest. We actually started the harvest. We waited the whole of the month of September, started harvesting at the end of September, and went right on till the 16th of October. And this, I think, is gives you an idea of a late ripened, beautiful year. I love the 14s generally, and this wine, of course, in particular. But they have the grapes got, the Cabernet's got, and the Merlots got perfectly ripe in this wonderful September, October period. But there's always a slight difference in the profile of the wine when the grapes get completely ripe at the end of the season to when they get ripe in the middle of the season. At least here in Bordeaux, it's so. So with that 15, you've got that big middle palate, slightly dry tannins. With this 14, and taste it just to make sure that it's what I'm saying is true. Yeah, that's it. With this 14, you've got absolutely delicious, ripe. You can tell the grapes were wonderfully ripe in this, but they also have this underlying freshness that comes from. There's a sort of coolness in the wine, even though it's ripe, velvety, and I think very silky and delicious. There's a coolness in it that comes from the cool summer. However warm it was in September, a little of that coolness remains. And these years, you know, it's important to bear this in mind with Bordeaux, because the journalists who descend on us every year, not at the moment, but we're descending on them with samples at the moment. But as you know, the journalists come here every year, and the wines the years that journalists tend to go euphoric about tend to be the blockbuster ones, the very ripe years. And there's nothing wrong with it. I adore those wines. 2015, everyone loved it because it was so sunny and ripe. 2016, everyone adored it because it's magnificent, perfectly ripe, and it was a hot year. 2014, they were much less euphoric about it, and I absolutely adore this year, and I love this wine. I think that a late ripening year of this sort, and there are others that historically we had 2008 and 2004 are both similar profiles to 2014. So cool summers, magnificent September and Octobers, and when you have a year like that, they can be sort of sleepers in terms of course, you have to like this profile of style, but I love it. The journalists will tend not to be too euphoric about the wines when they taste them on primeur, but they make some of the most beautiful wines that Bordeaux makes. And 8 and 4 and 14 are all lovely examples of that. And lovely examples also, the fact that the market goes less crazy on pricing with these cooler years, but they're lovely wines to buy and to sell up.
So Christian, in terms of so those cooler years, and we've got some people really enjoying this 2014. If you were to sort of compare to other years that you think of a similar characteristic, that sort of cooler classic style, which I must say, having sold Bordeaux in New Zealand for a few years now, we do find that it is the years like 14 that really hit favor with our customers that buy for drinking.
Yep.
Yeah. What other vintages would you sort of put in that category?
Well, as I said, 2008 and 2004, definitely. The profiles are extremely similar in the sense of perfectly okay summer, but cool. And then in each case, a wonderful end of season, the September and October that enabled us to get them ripe. Then you could, I would add in 2007. If 2008 was a year where you had a cool summer, completely saved and transformed by a wonderful September, 2007, it was almost so. So 2007, we did have a very nice September. It probably, if you compare 7 and 8, 7 is absolutely delicious right now. But the 8 had a slightly more important ripening period at the end, and if you compare an 8 and a 7, you can see there's a little bit more, there's a little tiny bit less ripeness in a 7, but a really good 7 from a property that's working well is absolutely lovely at the moment, and I think will be for a long time. So 8, 7, 14, and 4. Yeah, those would be the ones in recent years, I guess, with that profile.
Very good, thank you.
Christian, it's always so interesting to taste the 2015 and the 2016 of a chateau next to each other, because they're both such highly regarded vintages, yet the character of the two vintages is always so different. And I think it almost equally splits in between customers as to which you prefer, because it's absolutely personal preference as to the style. But I certainly, funnily enough, with all of those twin vintages over the years, if we look at, say, like 89, 90, 95, 96, 2009, 2010, 15, 16, I've somehow always had a preference for the second of the two out of all of those twins. And it's just really interesting that that's the way that it's fallen. And I'm wondering, working in Bordeaux for all this time, obviously it's very special when you have such a great vintage that's so highly regarded, and then you're working the harvest and you're seeing the grapes come in the following year, and it's looking just as good, if not better. What's the kind of the feelings in the vineyard and with the workers in the chateau and yourself when you're seeing that it could be like a twin vintage like that, one of those famous ones?
Yeah, it feels pretty good. So I remember, for example, in 2009, which of course is magnificent here, when during the harvest I was having lunch with Jean, because this is France. We have lunch every day, even in the middle of harvest. Of course, it's very important. And so I was having lunch with Jean-René Matignon, who's the winemaker and technical director of Pichon Baron, and we were coming to the end of 2009, and he said, well, at least we will have experienced this, because in 2009 was such a magnificent harvest and such a great year. And then the following year, along came 2010, and 2010 is, I think, has claims to be considered at least as great as 2009. It varies from property to property, but here at Pishon, I reckon 2010 is going to give 2009 a very good run for its money. So having said it, you know, we were extremely moved by 2009, how wonderful it was in every way. We found ourselves going through another year where we were tasting the wines, seeing the grapes, and thinking, my God, this is another really great historic year for Pishon. And so it's a wonderful feeling, is the answer, and it's part of the joy of looking after a great historic property like Pichon Baron. You know, every year you start again, and every year there's a chance that well, it's going to be a great wine, that's for sure, but there's a chance that it could be one of the very great ones, and when that happens, yeah, it is a bit of a thrill, actually. That's a bit of British understatement.
Fantastic. We've had a question, Christian, about with the 4 vintages that we're tasting here, how long do you think these would ideally sell for? Obviously, it depends on how mature you like your Bordeaux, but perhaps for your own personal preference, maybe?
Well, I tend to drink wines young and old, and I like them every step of the way. And in fact, I regularly commit infanticide and drink absolutely marvelous vintages very young, because I find it's part of the appreciation of them. On the other hand, if you give them the time they need, then they will reveal other things. And so it's probably a bit trite to say never too young, never too old, but neither is actually true, because there are some wines. I think it varies enormously from wine to wine. So, for example, we were talking about 2010. 2010, which I think is one of the great vintages, actually was a little unapproachable for quite a number of years, and it wasn't just a crime, it was just silly to drink it young, because you weren't getting much out of it, and that's one that will reveal more later. And then 2009, just to stay on those two, 2009 has been wonderfully seductive and open from day one. You could drink the 2009 the next year and have a great time, and you can drink it today, and the great time is getting better. So it does vary from wine to wine. To talk about these ones specifically, they will all age for at least another 10 years without any trouble at all, and go on revealing things and getting better. And I include the 2017 in that, because this, of course, it's probably the most delicate of the 4, but all the elements are in place in this 17. It's very balanced, fresh, harmonious, and while it's the one that I would, along with the 14 maybe, the one that I would drink most now, I know that this 17 is going to be utterly lovely with a few more years bottle aging. So you can age it, but in order, I would drink the 17, then the 14, and then I'd wait as long as I can for the 16 and 15. And probably the 15, curiously, would be the last one. I think the one that needs the most time, because it's always had this slight tannic structural edge to it that which is lovely, and it's great to drink right now. But I think that if you give it a bit more time, it'll soften out and reveal more.
Lovely, thank you, Christian. We just have another question here, and perhaps to sort of add one to it. So, looking back at harvest in 2020, just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the vintage in 2020 is the question, and also in relation to COVID and the challenges obviously that has put on us globally, but how has that affected things like vintage in Bordeaux?
Well, to answer the second part of the question first, COVID, obviously it's a great catastrophe for the world. But in terms of how it's affected us specifically, we were, as it became obvious in February, March last year here in France that we had a bit of a problem on our hands. The primary worries were obviously protecting the health of all the people who work in our vineyards, not just here at Pishon, but everywhere in the other vineyards too, and also enabling us to look after the vines and actually make the wines. And so the twin worries are either someone's going to get sick. Luckily, nobody got sick at work here in any of the properties, so that I was very pleased about that. But people, you have to carry on because you have to look after vines. You can't just sort of do that by a computer at home, and the wines have to be made. So I suppose the big concern was that there might be an outbreak of COVID in any property, which obviously would be extremely worrying for the in terms of the people, and also alarming the idea that you might not be able to make the wine, which would also be a terrible thing. And we got lucky basically. Of course, we took every single possible precaution we could. Everybody working very distanced and all that. And basically, we were able to look after the vines and make the wines, and that's a wonderful thing, because you could imagine a really terrible scenario where there's a real serious breakout of the illness with all that entails, and not being able to harvest. But luckily, that didn't happen. So that's the first thing. And then 2020 is well, it's great. It's a lovely year. It started off very wet, which is good. Filled up the levels of water in the soil. We had a slightly tropical early spring, which meant flowering. Just before flowering, we had a risk of mildew, and then it got very dry and sunny, and we had an early flowering, and thereafter really nice weather set in, and so it was a lovely long sunny summer, and great conditions in September for harvesting. And I think 2020, it's where it gets slightly embarrassing, because we've 18, 19 and 20. So we were talking earlier about when you have pairs of great vintages, but I think 2020 is number 3 in that particular series, and very, very lovely wine. And if you know a little bit the personalities of 18 and 19, where 18 was extremely ripe, exuberant, and expressive, and 19 was wonderfully fine and pure and precise. I'd say 20 is somewhere in between the two of those, but very, very, very good.
Excellent, thank you. I think you just, sorry?
I'm from Bordeaux. We say that every year, but it's true, I promise you.
I was going to say, I think you've just given me how to write this year's campaign. Is we've now got a trio of vintages. That will be a first rather than a duo.
Yep. Well,
perfect. Christian, we have another question for you. So if you were talking about having lunch,
yes.
but if lunch is starting with the Blanc Sec, and then you're having Terroir de Longueville 2015, what are you going to eat?
What are we going to eat? Well, for our harvest lunches, if we're talking about specifically harvest lunches, because during the harvest, we have harvest lunches every day, and we tend to go for sort of rather traditional French dishes like daube, the sort of long, slow-cooked dishes, which I love anyway. And the advantage of those is that because they're in a sort of big pot, people come in at different times, because whatever work they're doing, they can't just interrupt it for lunch. And so that, from that point of view, if you're talking about the specific circumstances of harvest, then that's what happens. In terms of general terms, Here in Bordeaux, we're pretty traditional. If you're asking me what I would do on Saturday or Sunday, I would have oysters with my blanc sec, and I often do. And I think that lamb with a Pauillac like this 15 is absolutely perfect, and that's what I would tend to do.
Excellent. Well, that's perfect. We have New Zealand bluff oyster season at the moment, and we have plenty of lamb. So there we go.
I knew you had all those lamb. It was just a marketing ploy on my behalf, you know. But actually, we have we're quite, you know, far fewer sheep than you do. But we have the Agneau de Pauillac, which is of course quite famous and is seriously good. So.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. So folks, do we have any more questions on those 4 wines or any more thoughts on them? We've had lots of comments coming through, Christian, as you've been talking about the wines, and particularly positive as I would expect in terms of the quality of them. So,
glad to hear
which is lovely, particularly the 2014, hence asking about similar vintages there.
Very good.
Right.
So I'm going to try and get back to the presentation because I just want to show 1 or 2 little pictures for the Pichon Grand Vin. Is this working? I think it is.
Perfect. We can see it again.
No. That's it. Okay. So we're moving to the to the Grand Vin of Pichon Baron now. We've got this wonderful pair of 17 and 16, and this view is really quite important because this is from the heart of the great plateau of Pichon Baron. Over here, it's not really in the distance, not that far away. You can see the Gironde estuary. It looks far in the photo, but actually it's very close. And in between, this is all us, and the vineyard you see here is Chateau Latour, and the vineyard you see from that tree onwards over there is Lascaz, and you've got this wonderful piece of land, and here's another view showing different telephoto lens showing that the estuary a bit closer, and that's it really. And then you have the 3 wines of Pichon Baron, the Grand Vin, Les Griffons and Les Tourelles, and a few interesting historical things, which I don't think are terribly important, really. I mean, of course it's important, but let's concentrate on that. Here's Jean-René Matignon. He's very important. So Jean-René, I've been working with here for 20 years now, and he's the technical director of Pichon Baron, and all the wines you're tasting, it's him and his team working together closely with me. But he's the man who's really responsible for the quality of the wines in the glass today. And that's the end of Pichon Baron. Okay, so we'll go to Quinta Navala afterwards. So I suggest we taste the 2017 Pichon Baron. So the 2017 Pichon Baron, as I said, it's usually around 80-20 Cabernet and Merlot. This is actually 79% Cabernet, 21% Merlot. I'm sure that when you taste this, you can see that with the Grand Vin, you have a depth and a complexity to the wine that is another level up. Of course, the fact of it being a more Cabernet wine, that also changes things. But the vines that we use to make this wine from the plateau of Pichon Baron, first of all, the average age is very high. The yields are very low, and that means that you have a wonderful concentration and power and complexity in the resulting wines, but also it does help to get them very ripe, because there is a fairly linear relationship between how many grapes a vine is carrying and how ripe they will get. And these very old vines, they've got very extensive root structures delving down into those deep gravel beds, and they don't carry very many bunches, and they have quite small bunches. We don't have to control the production because it's naturally low on this plateau. So old vines, deep root structures, great terroir, low yields, that's what you get. And that's I think a fine example of a great Pichon Baron from what is recognized as a cooler year, but when you taste this wine, you can see that it's there's a lot of ripe plenitude in this wine. It's of course it has freshness and harmony, everything like that, but it's a pretty serious 2017. That's what I think, really.
It's interesting, Christian. Every year when the new wines arrive from the vintage, Liz and I usually host a tasting of all the first growths together, and we'll sometimes throw in some other things, like we had Petrus in there this year, and then we'll do a second growth tasting as well. So some pretty fantastic wines. And I think Liz and I both agreed that the one we did last year with the 2017s was probably the best tasting we've ever done on that, and most of the customers would agree as well. And that includes, 16 and 15, which were incredible wines and very intellectual wines, and wines which are obviously going to be for the ages. But in terms of just the sheer wow factor, the 17s have it at the top level, at the Grand Vins. They're actually incredible. They're wonderful, wonderful wines.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The enjoyability factor is pushed to the maximum with this vintage, I think.
Yep. And again, the extraordinary thing about it is that this is a Pichon Baron Grand Vin, and it's not very old, but this is fun to drink now, and that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a long aging Pichon Baron, because it will. But it's certainly a wine that if you want to drink a bottle now, it's absolutely lovely. I mean, I would recommend only doing that if you've got a few other ones, because it will definitely reveal more of itself as time goes by. But if you have the luxury of being able to have a bottle now and then try another one in a year and another one in a year, I think it's a good candidate for that. Obviously, tannic structure pretty present at this stage, but that's normal for a Pichon Baron. But the tannins, although they're analytically quite strong, they're perfectly ripe and very fine, obviously, as you would expect. But the finesse in these great powerful tannins that you get from old vine Cabernet on these great soils in southern Pauillac it's vital, because that tannic structure is really the sort of backbone that the wine needs for it to develop in time, and for the actual rather delicate aromatics and flavor profiles to emerge over time, and that's what will happen to this wine. Lovely though it is to drink now, it's definitely one to wait for if you can.
We've got some lovely comments here on it, Christian, as you would expect. And I think there's, you know, Regan, you've already said it, but there's one comment here that I love because there's only one word. It just says, wow.
Ah, well, that's all right.
Great comment. Perfect tasting note.
So I've just poured a 16, and I think it's worth giving a little time and tasting this wine. We talked about the vintage before. It was a year that had a lot of aspects to it that it's really everything you ask for as a grape grower and wine producer. The circumstances were favorable. So we had long, as I said before, with the 16 Tyrrell, you had this prolonged ripening period, lovely sunny weather with enough rain as well in the summer, and then perfect conditions at the end, which enabled us to really take our time and finish the harvest very late, actually, on the 19th of October in 2016. That's actually rather vital for the very grand Cabernets that you get in a magnificent year like 16. The longer you can wait for, you don't want them to be overripe or anything, but it was sunny, but it was cool. They weren't getting overripe; they were just getting perfectly ripe. And there's something very complete about this 16. I think very. It's very rich, complex, harmonious, and many layered. I'm sure that the 16 is it is a Pishon for the ages. It'll go on developing and showing us other aspects of itself for many decades to come. But at this stage, it's just extraordinarily fun to taste it, and it's quite delicious right now. What the thing that strikes me most about this wine is the sort of harmony and completeness of it. Everything is in place, and it's just a lovely Pichon Baron. We consider it one of the great Pichons. So.
Christian's both wines are super impressive, but you know, I can see what you particularly like about 16. You know, whilst we've had a lovely comment here which relates to the fact that normally when we're doing tastings in our stores, we're the ones standing there pouring wines for our customers, and we've just had someone ask if their glass can be refilled again, please.
There's not much I can do about it from here, I'm afraid.
But my question was actually more about the longevity of these wines. So can you talk to us a little about how long you would be putting these in the cellar for?
Well, I think that I think it's a mistake to be frightened of opening your own wine. If you've bought it, you can do what you want with it within reason. And when people say, it's a crime to open such a marvelous wine that's going to be so marvelous in 20 years' time, it's a crime to open it early. Well, crime can be enjoyable, as we all know. We don't all know, but anyway, there are aspects to transgression that can be enjoyable. And of course, if you have a bottle of 2000, if you just got one bottle of 2016, and you pop the cork and you drink it, you're probably going to regret it the next day. But on the other hand, you will have the most wonderful experience. This is an absolutely wonderful wine right now. And if you had a fantastic lunch and a fantastic day, and you open this wine and you had a great time, that's what we make it for. And it's for people to have a good time. And so if you want to drink it young, it's never been an issue for me. I think drink it when you want to and when you enjoy it. But on the other hand, if you, it's more comfortable to do that kind of slightly naughty thing of opening a bottle too early if you happen to have a few bottles, and then you can think, well, that was great, but I think I ought to wait another few years for the rest of it. And with this 16, it's like that. The 17 too. The 17 will age magnificently because it's also a very harmonious wine. Both wines are perfectly ripe. The 16 with perhaps a little more richness and depth to it, and both of them have this sort of this freshness, which is a vital part of the harmony of the harmonious whole of a great Pichon Baron. And it's that freshness, along with the tannic structure and the lovely fruit that's there, that will enable these wines to age really for as long as you like. So here at the Chateau, alas, we don't have very many old wines, but occasionally we pull out a bottle of 59, a bottle of 61, 62. Those are three utterly lovely years from 60 odd years ago. They're still, and if I ever do that with people, and I do it blind, people say, it's your 1990, isn't it? And when you have a really great terroir like Pichon Baron, and by the way, in 1961 they were only making wines from the Grand Plateau as we do today, so those very old wines are true expressions of the great terroirs of Pishon. These are wines that can age, and these will age for 50 or 60 years. If you want them to, or if you want your children to have a good time, then they will. It's not necessary to age them for that long, but it's a characteristic of these very great wines from these very great terroirs that they will and they can age, and they will reveal something different along the way. And you can just have enjoyable moments with them if you have the luxury of having a case of 2016, choose your moments as the years go by. It's going to be good every time. That's what I recommend. And I don't think one should ever feel inhibited. It's never a bad idea to open a bottle of great wine.
Naturally, being retailers, Christian, we couldn't agree more.
I can assure you that I follow my own advice.
Yeah, very, very good. So folks, are there any questions for Christian on those wines? We've had some lovely comments on them. And actually, Christian, we had some memories there of, we had Jerome come and visit us when we could, of course, travel, and he did bring some older vintages of Pichon Baron for us. So we've got some people joining us tonight who had the pleasure of tasting it then. So yeah, some lovely memories coming through from that. So good. Yes. And Regan's just pointed out we'd like to take one of your quotes and use it if that's okay. The quote being, it's never a bad idea to open a bottle of, oh sorry, it's just moved on my screen. It's never a bad idea to open a bottle of great wine. We thought we'd just put that across the front of the website.
I stand by that.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah. Yeah, and the next comment that's come through is that this has been a great opportunity to see the vintage variation. And I think the lineup that we've put together has shown that. And then also to see, you know, the Grand Vin beside littorals and the vintage impact as well has been excellent.
Good.
Can you just, I know, sort of sideways question, but the difference between Tourelle and Le Griffon?
Yes. Okay, I think that I can go back to my, yep. If I can just quickly, I'm getting good at this. No, I'm not. That's Quinta Noval. Hold on. Just want to go to my map. There it was. Okay, so remember, this is the map of Pichon Baron. Chateau here, Grand Plateau here. The Tourelle part, basically the heart of the Tourelle parcel is here, because this is very Merlot. This is a very Merlot parcel, and so that always forms the heart of Tourelle. And then Tourelle is basically sourced, globally speaking, from these wines here. That's the Petit Verdot there. The Cabernet Sauvignons and Francs are here, and that is the Tourelle makeup, basically. And Les Griffons tends to be, there's a bit of Griffon from here, and there's a bit of Griffon from here. So Griffon tends to be, if I were to sort of do a very big simplification, I'd say Tourelle is our second wine. It's the historic second wine of Pichon Baron, and it has all four varietals: Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot. And it's the most Merlot-based of our second wines. And Les Griffons is more Cabernet-based. So Griffon will tend to have about 50-50 Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot in it. So there's a slight geographical difference in that the Griffon it's a little bit more Cabernet and less Merlot, and that Les Tourelles is all four varietals. So it has its own complexity because it's got the Franc and the Petit Verdot, and there's a slight geographical difference as well. And both the Tourelle and the Griffon regularly, we call them our two second wines, because in terms of levels of quality, they regularly, when the journalists taste them, they get scores that are within 1 point of each other, up and down. Some years as journalists, one journalist will prefer Tourelle, sometimes they'll prefer Les Griffons, but they consistently come out at similar quality levels. They just have a different personality, and that's basically the essential difference.
Okay, so Christian, thank you very much for that. So just a couple of things on that. There was a question here. So no Cabernet Franc or Petit Verdot and Griffon at all? No,
usually not. I say that, and I'm conscious of the fact that I've just signed off on well, not just, but about 6 weeks ago, signed off on a blend of Les Griffons 2020, which has got a little bit of Petit Verdot, but it just worked. You know, we don't approach these things with a fixed formula of what we want to do. A lot depends on how it goes in the tasting room, and so we do many tastings of all these wines from all the vineyards of Pichon Baron, and the final blends are decided on tasting. It's tasting that decides, but there is a fairly consistent pattern that emerges, because obviously different terroirs have different character. So a little parcel of wine can migrate from one wine to another if we think that it works well for both blends. In 2020, a little bit of the Petit Verdot went to the Griffon, but normally Griffon is just Cabernet and Merlot.
Excellent, thank you. And just for everyone listening in, just for some clarity there, we obviously import Pichon Baron and have for a long time worked with Chateau de Longueville. We don't at the moment import Griffon. Just that historically we've worked with Tourelle. You know, never say never. Something we've looked at. This gets confusing, Christian, when there's lots of wines. But yeah, never say never. Very good. So Quinta de Nouvelle.
Very good. I will go back to my screen and Quinta de Nouvelle. So Quinta de Nouvelle is where I started looking after vineyards nearly 28 years ago now. And I had the great good fortune to be parachuted into Quinta de Nouvelle as managing director when just after AXA had bought it. Quinta de Nouvelle is a great historic vineyard at the heart of the Douro Valley, with a sort of iconic reputation for its vintage ports, both Quinta de Nouvelle vintage port and also the National, which is the tiny volume of ungrafted vines that we produce, that we produce to make a very special vintage port from time to time. So in the north of Portugal, here's the Douro Valley. Quinta de Nouvelle is right there. And here are a few images which give you an idea. It's a very special. I know you have an enormous amount of magnificent, majestic, and beautiful scenery in New Zealand, but occasionally there are a few bits of Europe that are not bad looking as well. And the Douro Valley in northern Portugal is one of them. And it's an extraordinary place because the vine's been cultivated here for a very long time. There is the Romans were certainly here, and it's for sure they must have made a bit of wine. But the big viticultural plantations happened from the beginning of the 18th century onwards. So you've got the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s. You've got 3 centuries of viticulture here. You have these extraordinary terraced vineyards. This in the bottom right-hand corner, you've got a picture of an 18th century vineyard. So those are stone walls that you can see that were built by hand, and basically they used to, attack the hillside with pickaxes and spades and just carve out these terraces and plant the vineyards. It's an extraordinary record of human endeavor in actually rather difficult conditions. Because one of the things about the Douro is that I'll go back to the images. One of the things about the Douro is the contrast in the wonderful generosity of the wines that we make there, and the actually quite hard, unforgiving conditions of the place and the climate. Because this is a very it's schistous soil, so it's schistous rock, not at all rich. The vines have to work extremely hard to get their nutrients, so you have very deep root structures. Fortunately, what makes viticulture possible in the Douro Valley is that the entire schistous rock formation at some point in prehistory was turned over on its side. And so schistous rock is, of course, a sedimentary rock, and normally is presented in flat horizontal layers. It's in vertical layers in the Douro. And that's the thing that makes viticulture possible, because the vine's roots go down through the cracks in between the different layers of rock and can go down very deep indeed, looking for water, because this is a region of extreme heat and drought conditions. We at Quinta de Nouvelle now, we average about 500 millimeters of rainfall a year, but that can go down to 300 millimeters, which is really desert conditions. And if we didn't have vines with very deep roots, it would be difficult. Anyway, out of these extraordinary conditions comes this wonderful wine. And the wine that we're going to taste now, I think I can, I'll just finally finish the present. That's a bit of history, which is, that's Carlos Agrelos, who's the technical director at Quinta de Nouvelle. And he's a very brilliant winemaker, and he actually followed on from his uncle Antonio Agrelos, with whom I worked for my first 20 odd years at Quinta de Nouvelle. So it's very nice to still be working with a brilliant member of the Agrelos family. And this is the range of wines that we make. We actually make quite an extensive range. So these are the red and white wines that we make from Noval. If you haven't discovered these wines, I do suggest you give it a go. Of course, the Douro is known for making port wines, and rightly so. But over the last 20 years or so, we've discovered the real potential for making red and white wines from Douro varietals, and indeed from some introduced varietals. And I think they're some of the most thrilling new wines in the world, and well worth a discovery. And then you've got our range of ports. So Noval Black, which is the sort of non-vintage port that we make. Then you have a late bottled vintage, and then we have a vintage port, and we have the vintage national. And the wine that we're going to taste now is a tawny. So we have a whole range of tawnies: 10-year-old, 20-year-old, 40-year-old tawny, and colheita ports. Colheitas being tawny ports like a 10-year-old, 20-year-old, 40-year-old. But whereas these 10-year-old wines, for example, are a blend of wines with an average age of 10 years, a colheita port is a wine from a single harvest that is just aged in barrel and then bottled later. And they can be very beautiful and fascinating expressions of tawny port. But what we'll do right now is focus on the 10-year-old tawny that we have in front of us. So 10-year-old tawny, as I said, is a wine that has aged in barrels for an average of 10 years. What that means is that we're in 2021 now. This is not a wine that came just from 2011. There will be wines in here that are exactly 10 years old, the majority probably, and then there will be wines in there that are a bit older. There'll be wines that are 15 years old, 13 years old, 12 years old, to give it a little bit more complexity. And there'll be wines that are younger too. There'll be wines that are 8 years old, 7 years old, probably not much younger than that. Just giving it a little dash of freshness. Blending these wines is one of the most fascinating things that we do, because what we're trying to do, there are many parallels in the world of wine. You have, indeed, in the world of spirits. If you have malt whiskies that are 10 years old, they're blending averages, trying to make it be more or less the same all the time. Although it isn't really. It's like a river. It looks the same, but it's changing. And you have champagnes as well that are blended in this way, that aren't vintage wines, but that always have a similar age. What we're trying to do with this 10-year-old tawny is blend together a wine that will have exactly the characteristics this wine has got. The classic characteristics of a mature tawny port that comes from Noval, and that we try to maintain a consistency of quality and style. So if you like the 10-year-old tawny this year, you're going to like the 10-year-old tawny next year. And we blending them is fascinating. We have many notes in our piano when we're doing the blending, because we've got about 5.5 million liters of port aging away in barrels in the cellars at Quinta Noval. So we've got lots and lots of elements to choose from. And the fact of doing an average age like this is vital in order to maintain quality and maintain consistency of style over the years. So this is a wine, if we can say it's got an average age of 10 years, it was vinified in the same way as we vinify our vintage ports, our LBV ports. That is to say, trodden by foot in lagars at Quinta Noval. It's a very old-fashioned way of making wine, but that's how we make all the ports of Quinta Noval. And all our high quality wines are made by treading by foot. When this wine was young, as you can see, at this stage in its life, it's got this wonderful tawny color, hence the name. It's a sort of pale reddish brown at this stage. It's still got reddish color that still comes from the skins of the grape. As a tawny port gets older and becomes a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old, that reddish color gets paler and paler, and the wines acquire a sort of more yellowy, greeny gold color, which you can see a little bit on the edges of this wine. But when this wine started out its life, it was very dark and profound color, like a young vintage port. And we put it in barrel, and as the years go by, the coloring matter in the wine polymerizes in barrel. It drops out in a sort of deposit, and we rack the wines regularly over the years, and the wine gradually gets paler. That's what happens to the color. In terms of the aromas, you've still got some of the, amazingly after 10 years, some of the wonderful fresh fruit aromas that the wine had when it was first made, but it also acquires wonderful complex aromas of nuts, of licorice, and all kinds of things. You can actually, you can go on delving into a 10-year-old Tawny Port and find any number of interesting tastes and aromatic elements. What that means is that these wines are really, they're just lovely to drink on their own at the end of a meal, at the beginning of a meal, or about breakfast time like me here now. But they have huge gastronomic possibilities. That you can serve these with is brilliant with blue cheese. It's also fantastic with all kinds of desserts. That anything that's got chocolate in it, dark chocolate, not too sweet, and there are actually some citrusy elements in here as well. So there are some desserts that can bring that out. Anyway, I invite you to enjoy a 10-year-old Tawny Port and to realize that you can do almost anything with it, gastronomically speaking.
I love this port, Christian. Funnily enough, I think even though Quinta de Noval is perhaps most famous worldwide for its vintage ports and perhaps National, of course, I think the Tawny ports from the house, whenever I try them, and I think about the Tawnies from some of the other famous houses out there, which I also love those styles as well, when I try the Quinta de Noval Tawnies, I'm always so impressed by the freshness and the vibrancy that is in these ports, that it just doesn't, it belies the age of them, and it's always like that. Noval always is so fresh, so vibrant, like you said, those citrus notes, so lively, considering how old the ports are in it. And I think it's a real hallmark of the house. And I love the Tawnies from Quinta de Noval, and great value, I think, as well, across the whole range, right up to 40. Mm.
You better not tell me anything's good value, or I might have to put the price up.
I've just had a customer say, "You were reading my notes, Regan."
That's good. And it's perfectly, thank you for saying that, because the freshness is an absolutely vital part of our approach to Tawny Ports, because obviously these wines have age, they have complexity, and I think you really do get that licorice thing that comes with age. But if you have a Tawny Port that just gets old, they're not so much fun to drink. You have to, by looking after them, temperature control, regular racking, and regular topping up, and also the kind of quality wine that goes in them in the first place, and the blending process. All those things come together to make the freshness, which I think is vital if you're going to, if you can sometimes come across an old Tawny Port, you think, yeah, this is really fascinating, and that's it. You've had your smell and a tiny taste. You don't really want any more, but it's nice to want to drink the glass and possibly even have another one. I'm not encouraging excess, just enthusiasm.
Excellent. I like that phrase very much, Christian. We've just we've got a customer online tonight who I'm just reading the comment, and this is someone who we had one of your neighbours join us online with their red wine, and we finished with cognac. And we converted this customer on that night to drinking cognac. They've just told me that we've now converted them also to drinking port.
I think it looks like life is going to become, well, dinners are going to become longer if they're going to fit all those things in, Anyway, excellent news.
It is, it is. We just got a question here. So obviously, you've got a lot of red wine in your portfolio, but the question is, if you were going to drink a champagne, what would you be drinking?
Oh.
Hard question for early in the morning.
I have okay, so spoiler alert here. I have a vineyard in England of my own called Coates and Seeley. So Some years ago, I planted out 12 hectares in a little chalky valley in Hampshire. And we've actually we're just planting out another 15 hectares. So I make English sparkling wine in Hampshire. But the reason why I do it, apart from being an Englishman and wanting to make a lovely wine in England, is that I am a great lover of champagne. And everything I do in England is really a homage to the wonderful wines of Champagne that I adore. And in England, I planted out Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, on my bottles I put Méthode Britannique, which is the Méthode Britannique is remarkably similar to the method they use in Champagne. That's all I can say. But anyway, the answer is I really like Champagne. I'm a big fan of lots of Champagne producers. At home I probably drink more. Apart from my own English sparkling, of course, I probably drink more Paul Roger vintage wines than anything else. I love Aigli Aurier as a producer. I particularly like what he does with Blanc de Noir. And I actually like quite a small house called Champagne Tarlan, who does an absolutely superb zero dosage. I'm not a fanatic for zero dosage, but theirs is absolutely brilliant. So there's a good long list of champagnes that I love. So thank you for the question, because it's a very important part of a happy life to have a regular supply of great champagne. And English sparkling, of course.
And English sparkling, of course. Yes, yes. You'll be very pleased to know that we have Paul Roger and Talent here in New Zealand, that we import Talent. Particular fan of it. So just back to the port for a second. Once opened, how long would you or could you leave this open for?
Okay, well, one of the advantages of old Tawny Ports is that they've grown up in contact with oxygen. This is a wine that's spent many years aging in a barrel. So oxygen, it knows oxygen, and you can, from both a retail point of view, if anybody serves this in a bar, if ever I'm in a bar or a restaurant, happy memories, and it hasn't been the case for about a year, but anyway, if I'm ever in a bar or a restaurant, I will tend to go for Tawny Ports or Collier Ports, because if by any chance the bottle's been open for a while, I know it's going to be in good condition, because a 10-year-old Tawny Port, I always have a 10-year-old Tawny Port and a Collier on the go in my fridge at home, and I keep them cool, because that's how I like to drink them. But you can the great thing about these wines is you can just have a little tiny glass, or even a big glass if you want one, but you can have just a little tiny glass, put the cork back in, put it back in the fridge, and it will keep for weeks. And there is no, I'd say for at least 4 weeks, there is no perceptible deterioration, because this is a wine that has aged in contact with oxygen. So that's a huge advantage for retail service of these wines. And it's a huge advantage for private consumption at home. It means that you can just have a great glass of wine that you can come back to from time to time over a period. And that's very important. However, the reverse is true, I'm afraid, about vintage port, which is that vintage port has not had a long time aging in the barrel in contact with oxygen. So when you open a vintage port, you really want to be drinking it up within 48 hours. And sometimes you can, the converse is that sometimes you can be in a restaurant or bar situation where they have a vintage port by the glass. It is important, I think, to ask how long it's been open, because if it's the kind of place where people drink a lot of port, it'll be, they'll open a bottle every day or two and there's no problem. If you're in a place where they don't and they say, oh, we opened that 3 months ago, I think I advise you to go for the 10-year-old Tawny in that case.
A very good answer. Thank you very much. And we have had some comments tonight, actually, that the port is a very nice way to finish an evening and might just need to become a tradition.
So, well, I'm all for traditions of such a nature, and I can only tell you that you know, it's unusual for me to taste quite so many wines starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I find that it's actually excellent beginning to the day. So I may start a little tradition here, although I may get into trouble if I do it every day, perhaps.
Perfect. We've got another question here, Christian, and we're going back to technical side of winemaking if we can for a second. And the question is with regards to whole bunches. Do you use whole bunches in the Grand Vin or in Le Tourelle at all?
No, we de-stem.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. I think that's a very clear answer to that question. Brilliant. Okay, folks, do we have any more questions there for Christian? I think if they pop up on the side, I will spot them there. But Christian, just wanted to say thank you very much for getting up early this morning to take us through the wines. The lineup is as I expected. It showed very clearly variation in vintage, but also Tourelle and the Grand Vin, but also the Blanc Sec at the beginning, which you know, is a particular favorite of mine. So any opportunity we get to taste that, always there, and port at the end, well, why not? So thank you very much. It's been a privilege to have you online with us tonight. I think we all would, if we could give you a round of applause online, be doing exactly that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this wonderful event, and thank you everybody in all parts of New Zealand who attended. It makes me. I had one of the greatest holidays of my life in New Zealand some years ago, and it makes me realize that as soon as we get free, I've got to come back. But it's very nice to have been present with a few glasses of wine today. Thank you.
Excellent. We would love to have you back here. So thank you very, very much. And